Okay. All right, good. So just so I don't forget, now that's 11:59. But yeah, so I think she thinks this is going to be her last birthday. So and my cousin has a home in Virginia and in the Outer Banks, and they were down in the Outer Banks. And so, she rented the house next door, which is a great big house, and the house across the street. And I was not going to be able to go originally because I was supposed to be out in Chicago for an event that got canceled when COVID started ticking up again. So at the last gun, I was able to make reservations and go down. And that worked out pretty well. So, and they rented a guest house across the street too. I'm one of 6 kids. The only people who weren't there from my family, immediate family, were my sister Barbara and her husband. They had been in Rome and came back with what they thought were colds, but was COVID.
Oh God.
So they're both fine now. They're fine, but they couldn't come down. And my aunt's granddaughter came in from Oslo. Her daughter.
Oh, I'm going to Oslo next week.
Oh yeah, she's always posting pictures on Instagram. I'm very jealous. It looks fabulous. So but I look at it and I always think, when does this woman ever work? She's always having fun and out in the mountains and skiing and camping and hiking and this thing and that thing and everything else. So we'll give people, we've got almost half of the people now. I know that some of the people are not going to watch live. They said they couldn't, but hello from Tempe, Arizona. Hello, everybody. So hi, Georgianne. I see you just logged in. How are you? So anyway, it's 12:01 on my clock. So we'll give everybody a few more minutes to log in. So anyway, Alma's in. Hi, Lydia from Reno. How's life out in Reno? Hi, Alma. Let's see. Well, yeah, it's 12:02. So let's give everybody a couple more minutes and we'll be fine. So that'll be good. Does anyone have any questions before we start though? Anything? Hi from Tacoma, Washington. Hello. No questions at all. Anything about any threads? We'll cover a bunch of different ones. But if you have a question about a particular thread or brand of thread, I'll do my best to answer. I have not used every single brand or thread on the market. The variety just keeps growing and growing, which is wonderful. That's all a good thing. I'll do my best to answer you certainly, and we'll talk. And a lot of the threads are similar from one brand to another. Some of them are better quality than others, but that and plus some of it is a matter of your preference, personal preference. So, okay.
Gail, I have a question.
Yes. Yeah.
I was trying to use, I think it was Razzle. In top stitch, the 9014 top stitch on my Triumph, Baby Log Triumph. Yeah. And it seemed like the needle was getting hit by the looper, the upper looper.
Oh.
And then there was a big, huge tangle. So I ended up having to untangle everything. And I switched out to a regular needle, the 705. And then I went to was the accent to use that, that thread, and then it seemed to be fine. But I thought, is it possible that I didn't have my needle all the way up into the place? Is that possible?
I was just going to say, I don't think it was the thread. I think that you probably didn't have your needle all the way up in the needle bar.
That's scary, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Oh yes, it is. It is scary. And sometimes too with something like that, if you whack it was the upper looper it was hitting, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
If you whack that upper looper hard enough, and you bend it, or chances are you're not going to snap it in half. It's pretty heavy, but even if you distort it a little bit, you might need to get it replaced. But I tend to think, Colleen, it was that you didn't have the needle all the way up in the needle bar. So always look in that little window above where the needles are. Make sure it's all the way up. Or also, I like to say that needles are like anything else. You might have had one that was slightly bent somehow. And so when I have a situation like that, I take out that needle, toss it, and put in a fresh one. But I don't think it was the thread. I think it was just getting that
Okay,
needle.
I'll proceed slowly.
Yeah. If you have a situation like that, what I always recommend, and why don't I hold off because it's 12:05. Let me say hello to everybody, and I'll get back. And if I don't, if I forget, tell me to mention that again.
Okay.
Welcome everybody. I think we have about half the people in so far. So, but it's 12:05 on my clock. So let's get started. And I thank you all so much for registering and for watching the class. And again, I mentioned this earlier when people were logged in a little bit earlier. If you haven't downloaded or printed out your handout, no worries, you have the link to do it. This is a lecture demo format. You can kind of sit back and relax. That's why this is kind of a fun class, because you don't have to really do anything. There's no pressure. So we like no pressure on a Saturday, don't we? So I'm very pleased you're all here. And I did a class that was similar to this. I might be able to go into a little more depth today, because when I do these for expos, you are really cut off right at the deadline, and you don't have any wiggle room for a few extra minutes if people have questions or you want to do a little longer explanation on something. But since I'm the boss, I get to do what I want to do. So anyway, but we're going to cover a bunch of different threads and weights of threads, fibers, and textures as well. And I'm going to do a little demo too on the serger to talk about that. But I also have a nice little slideshow that we're going to start with. But Colleen Vindhagen did I pronounce your name correctly?
Vindhagen.
Vindhagen. Thank you. Yeah. My Swedish is a little rusty, Colleen.
Well, mine is not the greatest, even though I've lived here too long, but so long, sorry.
So Colleen was mentioning before everybody was here that she had a problem with razzle thread. Now, is that the one that's the metallic Wonderfill thread?
I can't remember it was that or the one without the metallic, but it was one of those that are, what is it? The eight weight. Yeah.
It's the 8 weight. Okay. Yeah. And she was mentioning that she had it in a top stitch needle, but that her needle was hitting her upper looper. So she had to take it out and change needle types. But I think that it was not the thread. I think that possibly the needle was not all the way up in the needle bar. But what I wanted to continue to say on that for everybody is that if you have a question about something, the thing I think is most important to do so that you don't damage your machine or damage or break the needle or anything else is that if you replace the needle and rethread and do all that, what I like to do is put my presser foot down, and I like to turn my hand wheel by hand a few times. And that way, if it hit something, and I do this even when I do twin needling on a sewing machine, I never step on the gas until I make sure that everything clears the throat plate without whacking it, because the twin needles too are expensive, and once you break one, you don't have a twin needle anymore, so it's annoying. So but what I think is always a good idea is that hello. Good.
Non, mais dérange l'employé, là, je te paye à l'heure, moi, là.
Okay. I'm not sure who that is, but if everybody could mute I'm going to mute everybody for right now. I'm not sure what that is. But again, if you have a question, I'm going to open up the chat too so I can see that. But if you have a question, you can certainly unmute yourself or here you are. Lori. Oh, good. You switched computers and here you are. Good morning. And from British Columbia, hello to Miriam. Okay, so let's talk about some different threads. And I want to show you my little slideshow first to talk about some of the different threads and the looks they give and the ones that you can use both on a serger as well as your sewing machine. Okay, and then after we get through the slideshow, or if anyone has a question, just let me know. Okay, and let me just see. I think, let me close that. Everybody. Okay, good. All right, so let me switch over to the slideshow. And again, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself. And I think we should be fine. Let me go to share screen. Share this and let me go full screen on this. Okay, can everybody see the slide with the yellow background and the decorative stitching? Now, sometimes for some reason, I have no idea why, but on Zoom, every once in a while, I can see the slides advancing. If you can't see it, wave madly at me. I see you over on the side and I'll have to stop sharing and go back in. I don't know why it does it, but what I did on this little sample, and this was right around when the Ukraine war started. So I did it with yellow and blue just to remember them. But I wanted you to see how much bolder a thicker decorative thread can be on your sewing machine. I did these on the Bernina 790 sewing machine, but even if you have a machine that does not have 300 decorative stitches or 200 or even 100, you can do some really beautiful stitching with thick decorative threads, even that are just utility stitches. Like if you look at this zigzag, this is a 3-step zigzag. That's the 3 stitches on the zig, 3 on the zag. But look how pretty it is. And if you did multiple lines of that in a row on a skirt or a top or placemats, table runner, whatever, it really gives it a lot of pop. This is just a decorative circular motif. And what I'm using here is the Wonderful 12 weight threads. It's an Egyptian cotton 12 weight thread with a top stitch needle in my sewing machine. Now, and down here, this is one of my favorite stitches. I just love this stitch. I think it's so cute. So I'm going to advance this and tell me, do you all see the next slide? That's my stitch chart. It didn't share. Okay, so let me stop sharing. Okay, and let me go back. And this is why this drives me nuts. I don't know why it does this. Okay, can you all see that now? Okay, and it says now participants can now see your application. All right, so this is one that I did for well, you'll see a bigger one. I go to my FaceTime one. This is one that I did for the Wrap Me Up on the single gauze beach cover up that I have in back of me, that turquoise fabric with the white stitching. Now you can see exactly what I did. And these are all sewing machine stitches. My thread color was the spaghetti, which is the cotton thread, and the color, I didn't bother with the colors because I decided afterwards, I was originally going to do it with different color thread, but then I decided to go all monochromatic and white. But I chose my stitch number from the menu on the machine. I changed my stitch length. Now the stitch width I kept on the widest one that stitch had. But so one of the important things to do, whether you're on your serger or your sewing machine, is always test. And I'm going to talk about different products for stabilizing as well, so that you don't get bad results. And I'll tell you that I did using different stabilizers, and I'll tell you the one I had really good luck with. So I tested 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different stitches, and I ended up with 3 of them, and I repeated stitch number 333 on the first line, the center one, and the outside one. And so what I did was I lengthened the stitch from the default setting on every single one, and I lowered my tension, I think usually 2 ticks from the default setting as well on that. And I found that I got good results with that. Now, let me go forward. I like to use a friction pen sometimes to draw where I want to stitch if it's an unusual stitch. If I'm doing, and the friction pens will erase with heat most of the time, but test them, because sometimes you get that ghost line. And I've mentioned that in other classes. And there are other, you can use a wash away pen or chalk or whatever your favorite marking tool is, but I kind of like the friction pens. And also some of them have a finer point on them, which is kind of nice for a line. Top stitch needles. I typically use a 9014 top stitch needle. And again, you don't have to take notes on this, because you're going to have the link to this whole slideshow and my narrative going along. So you can just kind of relax. So I like the top stitch needle, and I like the 9014 simply because I think when you're going through fabric and stabilizer, the 9014 works well. And a top stitch needle varies with a few different features from a universal needle. It has a longer eye, and you'll see that on metallic needles as well. And the reason that the longer eye is good for thicker threads is because it creates less friction. I'm trying to think, I think when I heard Rhonda Pierce, who's Schmetz's national spokesperson, I think that she said for every stitch, the thread goes back and forth in the eye of the needle about 12 times. So that's a lot of friction. And she's very, very interesting. And I've mentioned this in other classes too. If you ever get a chance to listen to her, she does lectures at expos and all sorts of different things. She's very interesting. And that's when you really realize how important that needle really is. I think the name of her lecture is 2 inches of steel. And she can give you every teeny weeny little nuance of what is different between one needle and another. Let me just make sure everybody's in who needs to be in. Okay. And also along with that longer eye, the bigger eye in a top stitch needle, it has a deeper groove or scarf along the shaft of the needle. And that gives the thicker thread a little more room also for it. So you'll always get the best top stitching or decorative stitching with a top stitch needle, or if you're using something metallic, you can use a metallic needle as well. So now here is one of the stabilizers. This is the Sulky brand. And I've mentioned this in my cover stitch class, that when I discovered this, I am not, honestly, don't tell the machine companies, I'm not a huge machine embroiderer. So I don't keep up with every single stabilizer that comes out on the market. But when I was doing a top for my Craftsy cover stitch class, I wanted to do some decorative motifs on rayon knit fabric, which is very unstable, thin, extremely stretchy. And no matter what I did for differential feet or anything else, it looked horrible. So I thought, I wish somebody made a sticky wash away stabilizer. Well, guess what? A bunch of companies do. This is the sulky one. You can pick this up at Joann's. You can probably pick it up at a lot of sewing machine dealers as well. I think OESD also has one. I know that Floriani does. Baby Lock does as well. I don't know what the names of their sticky wash away stabilizers are, but if you have a particular one that you like, a brand that you like, you can go onto their website and find the one that is a sticky wash away that holds everything in place, whether you're doing it on, and you don't always need it on your serger, but I will talk about when you do need it. But definitely doing decorative stitching on your sewing machine, you absolutely need it. I tried heavy tearaways, other washaways, it did nothing. The fabric just crinkled right up, it bunched up, and it made a mess. And also then I had a thread nest on my hand. So the sticky wash away is really the key. And I personally will put down a whole sheet of it, even if I'm not going to take up the whole space. But before I throw it in the washing machine on the hand wash cycle or soak it, I don't like all that stuff going into my plumbing. So I carefully trim away most of the excess, but don't go too crazy trimming away, because you don't want to accidentally nick and cut your stitching either. So that's that one. These are the wonderful threads that I was using. You'll see my shawl come up in a few minutes, and I used all but the white one on that shawl. I used 9 different colors. This one, the lower one, is the Bayside Blooms. So those are the soft pastels. And the top one are the Wonderful paint box threads, and they're all bright, bold colors. And that's what, if you put in the code DECO, DECO, Expo, EXPO, all in uppercase, I think, you'll get 10% off on those from the class as a thank you. Here are those Bayside Blooms ones. And here's that stitch again. I told you I liked it. Here's the little circles. And this was all stitched out. Now, this is a pashmina that I had for a few years. It's just an off-white, very soft. And this was the first time I tried the thicker threads on my sewing machine. And when I tried to do the tearaway stabilizer, because it was so soft, and I don't want to say it's loosely woven, but it's kind of loosely woven. It just didn't hold it. But when I put that sticky wash away on it, it worked beautifully. But you can see the thickness of each stitch up here. You can see it down here, more on the linear stitches. And I'll talk about why you want to lengthen your stitch. And that is, I'll wait till I go back to me again. Here's another shot of those stitches. And here's my line that I drew with that friction pen, just to make sure I was following where I wanted to be on that. And I'll talk about different stitches that you may or may not want to use. Here's the shawl. It's pretty. It's really nice. It really kind of jazzes it up. It was just plain before. So I kind of like the way it came out. This one is my collage. This is a wall hanging. The original size of the wall hanging in the pattern is a 12-inch square. I had it enlarged 50% to be an 18-inch square, because I knew I wanted to use some of these bigger motifs for decorative stitching. These 1, 2, 3 different colors. These, the fabrics are all recycled t-shirts from Goodwill. And so they're all just knit. There's nothing special about them. I just washed them when I got them home, and I decided what colors I wanted to use. And I was going to use different color threads. And then I thought, you know what? I think I better go monochromatic on it, because there's enough going on with the colors that I thought the monochromatic stitching would work better, but you can see how nicely those stitches came out. I had no problem whatsoever. So the key really is that sticky wash away stabilizer, any of the brands. But again, now I have not used every single brand. If you find that you're not getting great results with one brand, try a different one. But generally, I think they probably will all work and they should be fine. Here's another, you can see some of these other little pieces of the decorative stitching. And then I just added some buttons here and there because I've got a huge button collection. I need to use up at least 25% of them before I die. So I like to add them in. But it's interesting. I have this hanging up on the wall. And I noticed I put the little hanger right in the center on the top. And every time I looked at it, it was sort of tilting. And then I realized, it was just the weight of the buttons. There were more buttons on one side than the other. So it was throwing it off. So I had to take the little hanger off and move it to compensate for the weight of the buttons. Who knew? But you can see some of them are stacked. So some of them have double buttons on them. This is the very first thing that I did. This was just a ready-to-wear sweatshirt, and I cut it up and changed the neckline. And I actually cheated and added in a little bit of Sashiko stitching in between the lines of it. But this was the first time that I tried the decorative threads on a fabric with the sewing machine. I've done tons of it on my serger. But again, here's a good example of exactly how thick each stitch is because of those thicker threads. And I just think it's so pretty because sometimes on things like sweatshirt fleece, definitely polar fleece, if you wear that, if you're in a climate where you can wear that. But anything that has any loft or thickness to it, sometimes when you use a lighter weight, like an embroidery weight thread, it's very pretty, but it kind of sinks into the fabric. This really stands out. And that's why I wanted to do this class, because I really think it can make a huge difference for embellishing. And all you're basically doing is stitching. You're just following your guideline and stitching. So I think that's it. So let me stop sharing and come back to me. Okay. Any questions about that at all? Anyone have anything they want to say? You can unmute yourself if you're muted and go ahead and ask.
What do you use for a bobbin thread?
Okay, good question. For a bobbin thread, you definitely want to use like an embroidery bobbin thread, like a lightweight thread. I think it's probably like an 80 weight, maybe.
Mhm.
The same kind of thread you would use for machine embroidery in your bobbin. Yes, I'm so glad you asked that, because you don't want to go even with all-purpose thread for your bobbin. I think you're going to just build up too much thread in that. So on that chart, you saw that I had a spot for it for you to put in your thread, your thread color. You could even put in the brand if you're not sure, or if you're mixing and matching different brands, if you're going from Wonderfil to Sulky to Superior to Floriani, whatever, you can put those in just so that you know which one was which, because sometimes we think we're going to remember that stuff, and then you look at it and then you're in your threads trying to figure out which one did I use. And I just did that a couple of months ago, so it's worth mentioning. But yes. Yes, a bobbin weight thread in the bobbin will work nicely, but I can't emphasize enough, and you've all heard me say this in my other classes, the first thing you want to do is test, and you want to test on your fabric, a scrap of your fabric that your project is made of, because I really wasn't sure on this one whether or not I'd get good stitching, because it's just a single gauze. It's very lightweight. It's a beach cover up. That's my wrap me up pattern that has a V-neck, a cowl neck, and there's a notch neckline that's similar to this neckline too. So it's a really cute thing. But with that sticky wash away stabilizer, it worked perfectly. I was amazed, but I tested it first. And the reason, pardon me?
Ben, fais ce que t'as à faire, je vais voir la.
Hello? Okay. The reason you want to test it is because that's when I figured out how long do I have to make the stitch? How much longer do I have to make it from the default setting? And the reason for that is, and I'm sure you've all had this happen to you, because I've had it happen a number of times, where if your stitch is too short, say for the fabric that you're working on and or the thread that you're using for the stitch, you're going to get just a lot of stitch stacking on top of itself. And you're going to end up with a big thread nest under your fabric. And then what happens is you have to get the jaws of life to get it out from your throat plate. It's, you have to shut off the machine, pull it out. And the worst part of that is, and I have done this, where you could tear a hole in your fabric from yanking and pulling, or if you're working on it, distort it beyond use anymore. So I always say, make a sample first. So the thing that I like to say about thick decorative threads is it's kind of the same idea as elbow room when you're flying. If you've got 3 big people in coach, they all are spilling on top of each other. They need to be up in first class. You put 3 little kids in those seats or 3 just slim adults, and they're perfectly fine. Everybody kind of has enough room in coach these days. You never know. But, it's the same thing with the stitching. If you've got a thicker thread, it needs more space between each time the needle goes into the fabric. So how do you do that? You're going to lengthen the stitch a little bit. And that's the same thing as if you're doing something with a decorative edge on, say, a placemat or a table runner. If instead of binding the edge, you decide that you want to just do a 3-thread wide on your serger to cover the edge, you're going to experiment with your usually 2 layers of fabric, your top fabric, your bottom fabric, and your batting, and test your stitch length until you get good coverage without the stitches stacking up on each other. So it's a little bit of a balancing act between the thread weight and the thickness of your fabric. Is that clear for everybody? Is that good? Okay. All right, good. Also, another nice thing, and I like to embellish with the thick decorative threads, you can really get nice surface texture on them as well. It gives your project a little more dimension, and I just think it stands out a little bit better and really makes things pop. I would say also, and this is something important, if you're using a cotton thread, typically a polyester wouldn't do it. And I don't think I've ever had it happen with a rayon thread, but I find that if you're doing something, say on a white background, I would test, especially with reds, I would test how color fast it is, because I know one time I did some decorative stitching on something white, and I had used a wash away marker. So I spritzed it, and it was probably about 10 o'clock at night. So after I finished the stitching, I spritzed it to get rid of the water, the marker marks, and I hung it up to dry on the shower rack. Well, the next morning I went in to get it to start working again, and I could see from spritzing it, a little bit of red ran from the red thread. So I would say definitely, especially with cotton threads, you want to test how color fast they are. And I find that the biggest offender for running tends to be red. So that to me would be something really important to think about. Also, on your downloadable sheets, You have one for your sewing machine, but I also did one for your serger. Now you can put these in page protectors and you can note, like, here's what I think I did the slide on this one. I did the wrap me up the beach gauze and I wrote everything down for what I had. But on the serger one, instead of just a stitch length and width, I did the thread color, the stitch, what thread do you have in the upper looper, lower looper, chain looper, if you're doing cover stitching, your stitch length, stitch width, and your tension also. So, and you can make multiple copies of this as you go along. If you like to do a lot of decorative stitching, you can make multiple copies. Write down at the top of the sheet what the project was. And if you're doing multiple lines of stitching, I kind of write them down in order. And typically, like on the beach cover up, I start with the center line and work my way out for knowing which stitch is which. But if you forget to do that, you can always just look on your sewing machine and match up and say, oh, okay, this is the order I went in for that. So there is one for your serger. There is one for your sewing machine as well. On the bottom of the tip sheet also, I have helpful notions, the top stitch needles, metallic needles, the sticky wash away. Also, if you wanted to do stitching on a delicate fabric, say like a chiffon or an organza or something that's very lightweight, even maybe like a rayon challis too. I love those fabrics. I love rayon challis. It's drapey, it's soft, it's so pretty. And but it also does not really have a lot of body, and that's what gives it that beautiful drapey soft look. So if you're doing something like that, along with the stabilizer that would be temporary to use while you're doing the stitching, you may also on some fabrics need to use an interfacing to support them. One thing that's always been kind of a thing that bugged me is when people would have like a t-shirt or a lightweight knit dress or top, and they would choose a very dense stitch on, say, machine embroidery, and then that whole area with the motif on it is like cardboard. It doesn't bend anymore, it's dense. So that's something to look at also, is that for the amount of stitching that you're doing with a thicker thread, you want to be aware of density and is it going to change the hand of the fabric. It doesn't mean that you can't do the same thing, but maybe you want to space out your rows of stitching a little bit more just to give them a little more room and keep the hand of the fabric consistent with what it was. So you can still use those threads, or you can cut down the number of rows of stitching that you're doing or whatever. So there are always little compromises in all of these different things, but you can definitely do it. It's just a matter of sometimes modifying things like that. I'm going to switch over to the other camera, a table camera, and I want to show you the difference between a couple of threads. I have the 12 weight cotton spaghetti thread. I also have an 8 weight rayon, pearl crown rayon thread, and you'll see that. And I also have woolly nylon over there. And somebody mentioned using accent thread. I think Colleen, you were the one who mentioned that, which is a 12 weight rayon thread. So we'll compare that with the 12 weight cotton thread and look at the difference. And all of these, and these are just the tip of the iceberg. I couldn't fit everything in. If you're somebody who likes to work on wool with wool thread, Valdani has, it's Valdani. Valdani thread has a wool thread that is just beautiful. And that's really pretty on things like sweaters or winter attire or wall hangings and table runners and things like that. Really, really pretty. I don't have any to show you today, but oh, you know what? I should, on my slideshow, it should have gone to a table runner. Hang on, before I go to the table, let me go back to my screen share and see if I can get that. It should have gone back to that. Oh, yes, I missed some of these. For some reason, it wouldn't advance before. Okay, so let me just finish off the slideshow. This is a Christmas ball, and you might have seen this before on another slideshow for just sergers alone. This is using 2 8-weight threads, one in my upper looper, one in my lower looper, with a 3-thread rolled hem stitch. And this is on my serger. And I just ran off a few yards of cording, and I covered up the seams on this Christmas ball where the fabric was tucked into some of the crevices. It's a styrofoam ball base. And as you get closer to the holidays, if you ever wanted to see how to make this, I have a free YouTube video on it. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. I know most of you probably have, but those are free. And I like to do a lot of Q&A on that as well. So that's 2 12-weight threads, or excuse me, 2 8-weight threads, one in the upper looper, one in the lower looper, and serger cone thread in the right overlock needle. Here it is. This is what I was talking about. Whoops, let me come back again. This is using the metallic gold. This is the 8-weight thread, and you can see that little green bead along the edge of the stitch, which is the lower looper thread. And this is a good example of showing you how to balance out getting good edge coverage without the stitches stacking up on each other. So I did experiment with this. This is a table runner. So you've got the top fabric, the lower fabric, and then batting in between. Now, when you're going over a decorative thread edge, like to go down the 90-degree angle on the next edge, a lot of times you need to balance out and level your presser foot. On your sewing machine, you have a little button or a hump jumper that will do it. And you can use a hump jumper on your serger. You just have to be careful positioning it. But sometimes this is another reason making a sample comes in handy, because guess what? This is the exact same thickness as this, where I want to be stitching that adjacent edge. So my foot is perfectly level as I go in. And actually, I would probably move this edge in a little bit closer to the needles, just so that I don't run out of this before I hit that edge on the table runner. These are tassels on different zipper bags, again, done with 2 8-weight threads. Maybe I might have even popped in another thread there, a lighter weight thread, just to get in another color, but definitely 2 8-weight threads, one in the upper looper, one in the lower looper, serger cone thread in the right needle, run off a few yards. Usually for a thick, big tassel like this, I might run off 9 or 10 yards of a chain. And I do have a tip clip on how to make these tassels. And my tip on this, and I had a woman who made my zipper tablet case a few weeks ago, and she sent me a picture. She said, my tassel doesn't look as good as yours. And when I looked at it, I knew she didn't press it with steam. So I said, give it a press with steam and it'll smooth right out. So that's, and there's one with black and silver metallic. These are the threads that I was using, the Wonderful. And that one is the Dazzle. So the Razzle, Colleen, does not have the metallic in it. This is one that a pashmina that I got at a thrift store on the Cape right before the holidays. And I decided I would do something fun with metallic 8-weight thread. And I did the snowflakes and the crystals on that. So lots of fun stuff that you can do for not a lot of money. You're not buying a lot of expensive things, but you know, and the crystals are not, they're not Swarovski. Trust me, they were very inexpensive. So I just popped those on and glued them on, kind of arbitrarily. I think that one slipped a little bit before I got the picture. So I'm just wondering, is that my last? Nope. And this looks like black and white, but this is actually silver stitching with cover stitching. This one is chain stitching. This one is a narrow cover stitch with the center and right needle. If your serger has cover chain stitch capability, the way you would do this is stitch with the right side of your fabric face down. The decorative thread is in my chain looper. And I've got probably a white or a gray thread in my needles. I had just one needle in for the chain stitch, 2 needles in for the narrow cover stitch. This is the 9mm wide stitch with the metallic thread. This stitch is called Twice as Nice, where it's the same exact 3 thread wide stitch, but you just kind of play around with the tensions on your machine. If you can play around with your tensions, you can do this. And I do have a tip clip on the Twice as Nice stitch. Here, these are the ones I was looking for. This is a placemat. I have a full tutorial on YouTube using this. This is all done with the 12 weight spaghetti thread. This is a regular flat lock, 3 thread flat lock here, 2 thread reverse flat lock here. And then, oh, and you can even make fringe. You can make fringe on your serger with thick threads, and it's really pretty looking with an 8-weight thread. These are 12-weight threads that I use. And then to finish the edge to make it look like trim, I did 12-weight thread in my chain looper and a narrow cover stitch on that. This is it, doing a ruffle with cover stitching, a triple cover stitch right down the center of just a piece of quilting weight cotton, kind of a batik. And I used the same thread for a 3-thread rolled hem on the edge. But the thing I like about gathering with decorative threads in cover stitch mode is I think it almost looks like smocking.
Mhm.
It's kind of pretty. And all you're doing is straight stitching, but it's that thick decorative thread that gives you the pop in your chain looper. And I probably had green threads in my 3 needles in cover stitch mode. Here's one. Now this thread right here, let me let Catherine in. This thread that I'm using right here is a 6-weight thread. It's even heavier than the 8-weight thread. Now, that brings me to an important point of finding the threads that work well on your serger. This is the 12-weight. This is twice as thick. Can you see the difference in it? So it really is dense, and it does make a difference. But on this one, it was an older thread that I happened to have, but all of the colors were a perfect match for these fabrics. And I was playing thread chicken at the very end. I was just hoping that I would have enough to finish all the decorative stitching. And when I finished, I think I had about 2 inches of thread left. So I just made it. And I think that might be the last, yeah, I think that one is the last slide. So there's your 6-weight, there's your 12-weight, twice as wide. And on decorative threads, the decorative thread number is just the opposite of needles. With needles, a 90-14 needle is bigger than an 80-12 or a 75-11, I think. The higher the number on needles, the thicker the needle is, the bigger it is. On threads, the lower the number is, the heavier the thread is, the thicker it is. So I'm going to switch over to the table and show you those threads up close. So let me go over there right now. Right now, what you're seeing, this is the spaghetti. This is the Egyptian cotton 12-weight thread. This is the 100% pearl crown rayon. Now this one has 2 twists there. It's a matte finish on the on the thread itself. There's no sheen the way the rayon is. So that's something to take into account as well. If you want to not have any sheen on your threads at all, you may want to go toward a cotton thread. But the rayon is very, very nice. And I love Pearl Crown rayon. I think it works well. And believe it or not, you can use that in a top stitch needle on your serger. I typically have never gone heavier on my sewing machine than a 12 weight thread. That's what I have used most of. I don't like to push my machines to try to do more than they're capable of. And I tend to think that when you get into something heavier than a 12 weight thread, you really run the risk of ending up with a big, huge thread nest. I'm not saying definitely that you can't do it, because I always say sewers are very inventive, and maybe if you lengthen your stitch out enough, you can get a really nice result with that. But I want to go over, I'm just going to get out of my chair and go over to the table, because I want to show you a couple of other things here with these threads. I untwisted the end of the Pearl Crown rayon so that you could see that. Let me make sure I'm in the screen. Let me move it a little bit. Yeah, you can see the 3 filaments that are twisted together for that. Now the 12 weight, which is 50% light, or yeah, I think it's about, I guess it would be about 25% lighter. That has the 2 filaments. Now I'm going to take this away because I'm going to use this on my machine. And when I want to do a little demo, I'm going to move this over. This is a 12 weight cotton. Here is that accent thread that is a 12 weight rayon. Do you see the difference in the sheen on these? It's significant. And this is the 12 weight works beautifully for a lot of different things. For if you want to have that sheen, I love accent thread, but again, that's a wonderful product, and a lot of companies will make a 12 weight rayon thread. I like it. But the other reason I wanted to show you this is something to be aware of. And when I first started doing serger tip clips, let me tilt this a little bit. I did a tip clip on thread nets. Do you see how the thread is starting to fall down and kind of pool around the bottom of the spool? When I use certain rayon threads, I need to use a thread net on them so that they don't fall down, because what happens is when this is on my serger, particularly, if the rayon thread, and you can see it's starting to get loose up here, if it starts to puddle and pool and get caught under the base of the spool, all of a sudden your machine will jam. So the way I eliminate that is I take my little thread net, and they all come in sergers, and you might even need it on a sewing machine too. If you're going on a horizontal spool pin on your sewing machine, you probably won't need it, but all sergers usually have vertical spool pins. So what I do is I pop this in just like this, just in the center of the spool, and I take that thread net and just bring it right up, and the thread pulls out very easily, and it's not a problem. So a thread net may be necessary on some threads, or on some spools. And I find that particularly true of rayon. I've never had that issue with a cotton or a polyester thread, but definitely I've had it a number of times with rayon. So that's something to be aware of. Now, I don't use woolly nylon or woolly polyester in my sewing machine, but I definitely do in my serger. So here's what that looks like. There's a lot of stretch to it as it stitches. And then once it's on the garment or the project that you're working on, it relaxes and it becomes fluffy again. Here's another one. This one is navy blue. you might be able to see this a little more clearly. And it stretches. It's got a lot of stretch, and then it relaxes. So those are just a few of those types of threads. Does anyone have any questions about any particular brand or type of thread while we're talking about those? Let me go back to me. If you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. Anyone? No?
Yes, I do,
Oh,
Gail. This is
okay.
Alma.
Oh,
I just
hi,
wanna
Alma.
know- thank you. I just wanted to get more familiar with the bobbin thread because I know that's very, very important in the thread. So what you said, you use a thinner thread, a regular thread that you sew with for your.
No. Even thinner, Alma, one that you would use for embroidery. A bobbin thread that you'd use for embroidery. And I think, aren't those typically about an 80 weight? They're very fine.
Yes.
Yeah. Like on the
Wow.
pre-wound bobbins that you can get for embroidery. Yes. No, even thinner than the all-purpose, Alma, because especially if you have kind of a dense stitch, you'll get too much thread buildup under your fabric and it'll be yucky.
So a fine thread, which is usually when I get bobbin thread, it's usually white.
Yeah,
You know?
well, some of the companies make bobbin threads in a variety of colors now. I think for years and years, all you could really get was black or white for bobbin thread. But I think some of the companies do. Now, if your tension is set correctly, I usually use either black or white. I have not bought colored bobbin thread simply because I haven't needed to. I haven't had it show up on the top of my fabric at all. But if it does show, then your tension probably needs a little bit of adjusting.
Okay. Okay.
But,
Thank you.
but that's like embroidery weight bobbin thread. That's what you need.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Gail,
I've got a
What?
question.
Okay, hang on.
Um,
Okay.
I have a question. I have a lot of Vildani
Oh, yes. Yep.
12 weight because
Yeah.
I used to do a lot of hand embroidery,
Yeah.
which I don't want to do too much anymore.
Yeah.
What's a good way for me to use this?
You can
Well,
use that for your
because of
decorative stitching.
The spooling.
Yeah. And that's kind of on like a little ball, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah. And does it have a hole that a spool pin will go through?
Yeah.
Yeah. You could try it on your sewing machine and see how it works. And you could also try it on your serger. I'm not positive that you'll get fantastic results on your serger with that type of spool, but you never know. I would try stitching with it. Set up your fabric. If you need to interface it, use the sticky wash away stabilizer, whether you interface or not. But what I would do is set that up, and I would try stitching at a slower rate of speed with that because it's not wound the same way a spool is, but I can't guarantee that you'll get fabulous results from that. I'm not 100% sure, but I always say, you know what? You try it. If it works, fantastic. And if it doesn't, well, you've learned. And I think I wrote that in the tip sheet too. I said, keep track of things that don't work also, because sometimes, again, you might try something a year and a half from now and then have the same problem all over again. And then you say, I think I did this a couple of years ago and I had a problem. I should have remembered. Well, if you have it written down someplace, then you can say, thread type or brand X did not work well on my serger, but it worked fine on my sewing machine, or vice versa, so that you have a record of what you tried, what worked, what didn't work. But I would
Okay.
definitely, and let me know whether you get good results or not on your sewing machine and serger. Because again, that helps me if somebody else asks a question at a future event too. I like to know these things.
I have a lot of them. So.
Yeah. And the Valdana threads are
could I
really
add?
nice. Sure.
Yeah, I'd like to add that I did try it in the overlocker, and I found that I had to take it off the ball and put it on an empty thread holder because it wasn't working coming off the ball at all.
Okay,
But-
now did you hand wind that onto the spool?
Yes. And
And
it
did
worked
you-
beautifully.
Oh, okay, so there's an answer. Now, did you wind it
Great.
tight or loose?
I don't know. It's not too tight. I don't think I paid attention. I just went after it.
Okay. All right. So this is why these virtual classes are so nice, because typically somebody knows what we're talking. So that's great. That's good information. So you
Yeah.
hand wound it onto an empty spool,
Yeah.
kind of one of those mini cones, basically.
Yes, this is
So-
a Gutermann cone.
Okay. And what do you have on the side of that? What is that?
Oh, I just stored it this way. I just attached the rest of the ball. to the
Oh, I
spool.
see. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's our answer. So save an empty cone that you have
Okay.
and try hand winding it. Maybe just wind it at a moderate type of tight,
Yeah.
not super tight and not real loose either. So, and that makes sense basically. So great. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. So,
Gail, I have
and
a question. And when you-
okay.
I have a Baby Lock Evolution as a serger.
Yeah.
It has an air threader. We're
Yep.
talking thick threads. It's not going to go through that air threader, is it?
Well, how are you, Fran? I haven't seen you for such
Yeah,
a
I
long time.
know.
It's nice to
Oh,
see you.
oh.
Yeah, it's good to see you. I have found that the 12 weight cotton threads will blow through air threading. Now, it might not on every machine, but if it doesn't, you can use a thread cradle. And I do have a tip clip on how to do that. I think I did that tip clip last year. So if you scroll back on my YouTube channel in my videos, you don't have to scroll super far to find it.
Okay.
But it will. Now, I have even found that on some machines, the 8-weight Pearl Crown rayon will blow through. But on my machine, I found that the metallic 8-weight threads for some reason don't go through. I think the metallic just doesn't bend as it goes through those threading air tubes.
Right.
But again, you can bypass that with a thread cradle and just pull it through.
Okay.
And if you're going to use multiple threads, which I'm not at the end of my slideshow. I apologize. I'm not at the end of it because I know there's another couple of slides I want to show you. But you can, if you're going to use two 12-weight threads in a looper, you're going to pull them through together with that thread cradle.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And but again, that brings me to a point of also, I think I mentioned it earlier about making sure that you find threads that work well on your serger. And Connie, I see your hand up, and Colleen, I'll get right to you in a minute. Find the threads that work well on your serger. Not all sergers are created equal. Not all sewing machines are created equal. So find the threads that work well, because if you're trying to do something and you're not getting good results, what good is it? So sometimes you have to kind of make some adjustments as far as the threads that you select and find the ones that your machine likes. Connie, you had a question?
I got on a little late, and I live in an area where I don't have a lot of resources where I live. And I didn't know if you had given some tips on where to find some of the decorative threads as far as resources, or if you have something on your YouTube channel or a handout. I just completed Bernina's classes last week on the L890.
Oh,
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing.
It is.
And they had some sheets that were very helpful, and I didn't know if you had something that was available like that or not, because this is my resource with you.
Where do you live, Connie?
Central Illinois.
Okay. The first thing I always say as far as resources for threads or whatever, I always say support your local dealer first. If you do not,
Absolutely.
because I always say that if we don't support our local dealers, you may pay a little bit more, but then when you want to get your machine tuned up or you want to buy something else from them, they can't stay in business if we don't support them. But that said, not every dealer is going to carry every brand under the sun. There are resources online. Amazon actually has a lot of different threads. The other source that I like to go to if I can't find something at my local dealer is redrockthreads.com. Okay.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I'm absolutely with you. I'm a small business owner myself. So first line is always the independent shop owners. I just find that they have kind of gravitated to isocord and embroidery, and don't offer a lot of other things. And as I've watched you, the sky is the limit. And
it's true. Especially with the 890 Serging, there's so much you can do. The Triumph does a great job. The Ovation does a great job. I have not used any of the newer Janome cover stitch machines. I've heard good things about those. Also, what I work on is the 890 by Bernina, but I do not work for them, and I don't make any commission on sales. So that I just like to put that out there. I'm an independent educator. So, but I always like to tell people about things that I find good quality that work well. But yeah, redrockthreads.com has a very wide, I don't know if I would say they have every single brand and type of thread that there is available, but they have a very wide variety as well. But you can also, I mean, what can't you buy on Amazon, please? My garage door wouldn't go up a few weeks ago, and somebody looked at it. He goes, "Oh, it's this little part that's worn out." He goes, "Let me take a picture." You go on Amazon, you order it, and then call me and I'll put it in. I was like, okay. So,
but I do appreciate that information.
Oh, sure. Yes. Yes.
You know, I understand. I need those local people for repairs and service.
We all do. We all do. Yes, they are a valuable resource. So we do need, and so many of them have disappeared over the years. Colleen, you have a question too? Up, unmute.
There we go. Hi. No, I had a response for Candy where she has these balls of thread. I read or I saw on some clip on the YouTube or something where either you can put your ball of thread on the floor or put it in a bowl next to your sewing machine or on the floor. And that will unwind that way without being unruly.
Okay.
And
or sometimes even like a coffee mug or cup or something like that too. Okay, great.
That might work.
Okay. And I think I saw, did I see another hand up here?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And you had a question, Elizabeth? Yep.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. I wasn't sure if I was muted. Yep. I tried using a 12 weight cotton thread in my sewing machine. I have a Solaris too. And I couldn't do it. It broke. Forget it. And I think I didn't use that bobbin that you said to use, the thin bobbin, but I didn't know I could change the tension. I should.
Oh, yes.
Should I have lowered the tension?
Yeah, I usually end up on decorative stitching with thick threads in my needle and the lightweight bobbin thread. It's the same bobbin thread weight as when you're doing machine embroidery.
Okay.
You are going to lower that tension. And again, I can't emphasize enough how valuable making samples are, because I know when I did that stitching on the shawl, that was one of the first things I did with the thick threads on my sewing machine. And I had to play around for a while. And I'm glad we're talking about decorative stitching on the sewing machine too, because another thing that I want to mention is sometimes some decorative threads have a lot of back action with the needle where it goes back and forth over the same spot a lot of times.
Yeah.
If you have a situation or a stitch motif that has that back action, you might want to consider a different stitch, because with the thick threads, most of those motifs were done, probably they were designed for lighter weight threads. But if you find that you get a lot of back action and you have a big buildup of threads, then, and it doesn't look good, then maybe just change to a different stitch, because there are lots of different stitches around. And as I said earlier in the class, that even if you only have 15 or 10 stitches that are utility stitches, you put decorative thread in your needle and they can look like $1 million, especially if you repeat the motif in multiple lines. It really pops and looks fantastic. And I like to say that, especially if you've got grandchildren, or anyone else, or even somebody who's a newer sewer who doesn't have the financial resources to buy a top of the line machine or even a mid-range machine. You don't need 8 million stitches to make a project look really nice. I always like to say that they're not out of the loop and they're not disqualified because they don't have the $20,000 sewing machine or serger. There are lots of things that you can do with the decorative threads. And that's part of the beauty of them, is that because you can do some simple motifs, even multiple lines of straight stitching, it can look fabulous. It can be very, very simple. And you don't need that super expensive one. But that said, also, as I said earlier in the class, not all machines are created equal. Some machines will handle heavier thread much more easily and give you a better stitch than other machines can. And typically that's as you're kind of moving up the food chain price-wise on machines. But that doesn't mean that you can't do some nice stitching with utility stitches either, and just playing around and adjusting your tension and your stitch length. And typically you're going to lower your tension and lengthen your stitch with the thicker threads. That is kind of the best takeaway for sewing machine.
And the size needle, would you use a minimum of a 90 top stitch?
I use the 90 14 top stitch needle because it's heavy enough and it has a big enough eye that I can use a 12-weight thread. Now, again, on my sewing machine, I've never gone heavier than a 12-weight in my needle. On my serger, I have gone all the way down to a 6-weight, which was on that placemat that I showed you before. That's a pretty heavy, almost like a yarn-like type of thickness on that. But you can also do things, and I'm going to see if my screen share, I don't know why it's doing this weird thing where it just automatically stops at one point. Can you all see that tape, the one that I just had? Okay, now, did the screen change?
Yes.
Okay, what we're looking at is the inside of my serger. And I'm looking at 2 12-weight threads and going through the air threading tubes. And what I'm going to do is pick them up on the, in the eye of the looper. I think that's in it looks like my lower looper. So when you're threading multiple thick threads, I wouldn't go much heavier than 2 12-weight threads, or if you had an 8-weight thread, you could use an embroidery weight thread. Tara, you had a question, you raised your hand. You can unmute yourself.
Like the filing thread that Silky does.
Oh yeah. Yep.
They had said that for embroidery, you have to get 6 that thick thread design, could you use other I have a Bernina 830 and it just doesn't seem to, the Filene doesn't like it.
That's
I'm-
your sewing machine?
It's my sewing and embroidery machine.
Okay. And so are you doing the built-in decorative stitches or trying to do machine embroidery?
Trying to do machine embroidery.
Okay. So that may be a case again. And I think the Filane is an acrylic thread, if I'm not mistaken, is it? Yeah. Okay. So on something like that with machine embroidery, that may be a case where you could try. Have you tried a bunch of different motifs with that thread?
No,
Okay.
I've only tried the embroidery with the thick thread designs.
Oh, okay. So are they like a more open design, like red work or blue? Okay. And it didn't like it. Okay. So there is an example. Let me go back to me while I'm talking here. That's an example of finding the threads that your machine likes. Now, what needle are you using? That could affect it as well.
No, I don't remember. I just, as you were talking, I remembered having trouble, and I just wondered if it was even possible to
use
use-
thicker thread in embroidery motif? Or embroidery mode, actually. I would say yes, but I'm not sure. The Filane thread, do you know what the weight of that is? Is it a 30 weight or I don't think it's a 12 weight, but I'm not sure.
I am not sure.
Let me see. Is that a Sulky brand?
Yes.
Okay, you know what? I'm gonna look it up on my phone right now. Hang on. I'm full service. I'll even look up for you. Hang on. Sulky. Is it Filane?
Yes.
Filane thread. Here it is right here. Hang on. Let me see. It's acrylic. Let me just see what it says. Oh, it's a 12 weight. Okay. That in embroidery mode, you don't remember what needle you were using now?
I don't.
Okay.
With the 90?
Yeah, but you could try it again, and no guarantees because I'm not sure. I have never used that thread in embroidery mode, but I would try it with a top stitch needle in, slow down the speed of your stitching. Okay, and you've got your embroidery bobbin weight thread in the bobbin. Okay, slow down the stitch speed, try a top stitch needle and see if that works. I don't know, but you know what, when you do try it, whether it works or not, if you would send me an email about that, again, if somebody else asks in a future class, I'll know the answer. But again, that's why I say you need to find the threads that work well on your machine. And when I do in-person events, typically I put in kits a 12 weight cotton thread, like a spaghetti thread, because I have found that pretty much across the board, unless somebody's got an ancient serger that hasn't been tuned up in 30 years, usually they can get decent stitching on their sergers with that. Now, embroidery mode on a sewing machine is a whole different kettle of fish. So test it out and then shoot me an email and let me know, Tara. Okay. Okay, let me just go back here one more time and finish this up. So here I have my two threads going through simultaneously for the looper. This is what I wanted to show you. This is on a bag, my Gail's favorite tote bag pattern. This is a triple cover stitch. The black is a triple cover stitch where I have 3 needles in that are threaded with serger cone thread, just good old serger cone thread. In my chain looper, I have one 12 weight black thread, and I've stitched with this side of the, excuse me, let me just get a sip of water. Hang on a second. We're into high allergy season in Connecticut. I stitched with the right side face down on my machine. Now the white thread is a chain stitch with one needle, but you can see if you look closely, I have two 12 weight threads in the chain looper and the white thread. And that gives me that nice chunky, bulky chain stitch on that fabric. And the thing that I like about covering chain stitching with decorative threads is that they stand up from the fabric. They don't sink down. And they, again, they give it nice dimension, and they just give it a little bit of textural interest, which I kind of like. Here it is on the side panel. Let me let her in. Here it is on the side panel. You can see the lint on my black fabric. The black is, it's really darker. I think I lightened this up so that it would show up well on the screen. The red, again, this is a narrow cover stitch. The center and right needles were in with red 12 weight thread in my chain looper. But then, and you can see I just kept the red thread in the needle so that it would show in the chain stitching, but two 12 weight threads in my chain looper. So it gives it a nice chunky and dimensional look. So does anyone have any questions about that? Now, not everybody, let me go out of there. Okay, good. Not all machines will let you use multiple heavyweight threads in it. And I always say, listen to your machine. If your serger, and I would never use two in my needle in my sewing machine, never, of any of the 12 weights or anything like that. I would just stick with a single one in the sewing machine. But if your serger really is straining and chugging, and you'll feel it. It will feel like it's stressing to stitch with too much thread in it. Take one of them out. You don't want to break your machine. And again, that's that whole idea. And I've done that where I put in a whole bunch of threads, and it kind of chugs along and the stitch doesn't look great. So then you have to kind of compromise and take out something and get rid of it. But I have also, to get nice thread blending, I've put up to 4 or 5 machine embroidery weight threads in, which are very lightweight. They're probably like a 40 weight, I think, most of the time, something like that, to give it a thicker textural look and blend the colors together. But on that 12 weights, an 8 weight, I think the heaviest I would go if I was going to put another thread in would be a machine embroidery weight thread with an 8 weight. I wouldn't try to put a 12 weight with an 8 weight in the same looper on the sewing machine. So any questions about that at all? Anything? Okay, good. I think we still got a few more minutes left. So I wanted to show you stitching. I do have a tip clip on this, but I thought it would be fun to see it live also. I'm going to put that pink 8 weight pearl crown rayon that I had in the close-up camera, this one. I'm going to put this in my top stitch needle in my serger, and I'm going to switch over to my machine shot to show you this. So let me just switch over. But before I do that, before I turn away from the face camera, does anyone have any other questions about anything?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
At your very first slide that you showed with the various threads on your garment behind you.
Yes.
You had an orange thread that looked like a fan.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And what machine did you use? I'm looking for that pattern.
Oh, that's the Bernina 790 sewing machine. I probably it's that motif, and that's one of my favorite ones. I know what it was. It was probably on the wall hanging that you saw, the orange.
Yeah, the orange.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, oh, it is. That's, as I said before, that's one of my favorite decorative stitches. I think it's so pretty, but that's on the Bernina 790 machine. But I bet it's available on some of their other models. I do mostly serger classes for them, so I'm not as familiar with every single stitch that's on them. But if it's on the 790, I bet it's on a bunch of their other machines as well. But it's a really pretty stitch.
Yeah,
And Carmen's asking, how long will you have the link? Carmen, once this class is done and the link is sent out to you either tonight or tomorrow, you will have the link forever. That is yours. You purchased it, so you can watch it at your convenience as often as you want. I just always ask students in the class, please don't share the link with people who haven't registered and paid for the class. That's how instructors earn money. So that's the only thing I ask, but you will have that link forever. And
thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. That's good to know. Did anyone else have any questions at all?
I do, Gail.
Okay. Yep.
This is Doris.
Hi, Doris.
Hi. I love that wave stitch. How can I create that on the Bernina 890?
You tell
Or
me.
something similar.
Yeah. The Bernina 890, I think that's a proprietary stitch that Baby Lock has. Now, because the Bernina L890 is a computerized machine, I know they are planning on being able to update the software in it to include other stitches. I do not know whether or not it will ever have the wave stitch, but that's why I worked on perfecting that twice as nice stitch. And I can go back to that, where you see the two different colors. Now they are in a straight line, and you can vary the width of the band of those stitches. Let me just go back to that screen share for anyone who wasn't familiar with that. I'll back up the slides a little bit. Oops. These are the stitches you're going to see in a few minutes. Oh, wait a minute. Let me come forward a little bit. Okay. The stitch on the bottom is the 3-thread wide. The stitch on the top is still the 3-thread wide, but you see the two different stripes of colors. The red thread, Doris, is my lower looper thread that's pulled to the top side of that. This was done on a table runner. And the green metallic 8-weight thread is in my upper looper. And I used white thread in my needle just to pick up the white in the fabric as well. But that's as close. Technically, if you want to play around with the looper tension going back and forth, you can get a wave stitch. But honestly, I think that because you're doing it manually, it's not going to look as uniform, quite honestly. But I do know it's just like I always say the computerized sewing machines and sergers are computers that sew and serge. So you can update the software, and I don't know if there is a patent on the wave stitch. I have a feeling there is, and that's why it was not included in this machine. I think it is proprietary to Baby Lock. But technically, if you wanted to fuss around with the tensions going back and forth, you could get that wave stitch. But I've tried it, and so far I have not had fabulous results with it. But you could try it. And if you're more persistent than I am with it, then God bless. I think that would be great if you could get it. So anyway, all right. So I'm going to thread up with the 8-weight Procron rayon in my top stitch needle on the serger, and I'm going to just switch over to that. Any other questions also? I thought I heard somebody else might have had a question.
I did.
Lori, okay.
Hi, is there a pattern for the cover up, the beach cover up that you could recommend to us?
Yes, that's my newest pattern. It's called Wrap Me Up. You can either get it in print or you can download it. And that's fantastic. I made it originally with just the cowl neck. And then I said, hey, this would make a great beach cover up. Or it has a length and shorten line on it. You could make it like a long caftan. And that's the one that's right in back. It's so quick and easy to make. It's incredible. And it has the 3 different necklines. It's got the V neckline, the cowl neckline, and then the notch neckline that looks like this that I'm wearing. So you've got the 3 different necklines. Because after I did the cowl, I said, you know what, nobody wants a cowl neckline when it's 90 degrees out. So let's do some others that are summery. But you can get that right from my website. Okay. Perfect. It's called Wrap Me Up. And I can get that sent out. It does have all the neckline variations. And there's even that's a cool pattern because it's got a QR code on the pattern that when you scan that, it will bring you to a little video to show you how to use those neckline facings, which is really fun. Yep. So, okay. Thank you for asking. All right.
I already bought the fabric for it. So.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you real quickly that I didn't even buy that fabric. I was working with my videographer who does my editing on my videos. And I was at her house and she said, you know, I've got this fabric and I don't like it at all. Do you want it? And it was this gauze. And I love gauze in the summer because the air goes right through it. It's like wearing a cloud. I was like, are you kidding? Are you sure you don't want it? And she's like, no, I don't like it. I was like, I'll take it. So I went right home and I made this top. So the only thing that cost me any money was the thread and the stabilizer on it. And I think it's beautiful. I love it. So, okay. So I am going to switch you over to my machine camera. Here we go. And I don't know why it's strobing. I think that will stop though. I hope. I've never seen that before. Yeah. I don't know why. That's weird. Huh. Okay. Well, let me thread up. And I am putting, and I apologize for that. I've never seen that before. I am going to go into my overlock mode on this machine. And you know what? Maybe this is so strange. Let me try to get out and go back in and see if it helps it.
Could you screen share so that you're not just a little tiny rectangle?
Can I screen? You can't see that full screen?
No, it's just a little tiny rectangle.
Really?
Oh,
Can you
guys see that?
yes.
Oh,
I see it full screen.
You don't have your machine set up, right?
Else
is right.
Colleen, if you change your view, you'll be able to see it full screen.
okay. Change my view.
Okay. So I'm going to go back in. Let me just see if I can. I don't know why it's strobing like that. That's really weird.
No, yours looks, the light flickering.
Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. I've never had that happen before. But let me switch over to my other camera. I'm not sure what the deal is with that. That's really weird. Let me just show you. There's my screen on this machine, and I darkened it up so that it doesn't glare on the screen. So this is the Bernina 890. I'm going to scroll down to stitch number 11, which is a 2-thread flat lock stitch. And I'll just familiarize you a little bit with what you see here. Oops, I just bumped my camera. Sorry about that. The boxes across the top, you see only 2 of them that have numbers in them. Those are my tensions. Let me just lighten it up a smidge. I just don't want it to glare. Oops, I'm going the wrong direction. Hang on. I think that's a little bit better. Okay, you see 1.5 on my left needle, nothing in the right needle, nothing in the upper looper. We're going to put the upper looper converter on. And a lower looper tension of 4.5. In a previous class, somebody had said, does Bernina make a machine that will auto set tensions? Yes, with the 890 and the 860 will auto set your tensions, but you kind of have the best of both worlds. Now, because I like to do a lot of embellishing on the serger and play around with different stitches, I can save my stitch settings with this little heart setting. And I can go in and save up to 100 stitches. I'm going to just scroll. And here's my raindrop stitch that I want to show you. And you can see I have changed my settings because the thickness and the weight of the thread between serger cone thread in my lower looper, which is over here, you can just see my hand pointing to it, and the thickness of that 8-weight pearl crown rayon is significant. So to get the stitch looking the way I want it to look, I need to modify or adjust those tension settings. So I have a top stitch needle, a 90-14 top stitch needle in my left overlocked needle position, but I lowered that left needle tension down to 1. I want that stitch, that thread having very loose tension on it. But I need high tension on my lower looper. So I have that cranked up to the max in 9. So, and now I am going to, let me just show you what I'm doing. Let me see if I can go back to the other camera if it started to behave better. I've never had it strobe like that before. All right, well, we can just live with it for a minute. I'm gonna flip over my upper looper converter, which is right here. That's that little piece. And there's a little prong. I just gently push back with my thumb and lock that prong into the eye of the looper. This is so strange. I don't know why this is doing this, but I've locked it in. And now I've closed the eye of the upper looper and I can stitch with just 2 threads. So the pearl crown rayon is going to be in my needle and I'm kind of working around my cameras. So, oops, I'm okay. I am going to try to get this in pretty easily. As I say, I don't want to bump my camera. Get that in. Okay. Let's see if I can get this. Now the 8-weight threads are a little bit trickier. So if I can get this in the first shot, it's a miracle. Let's give it another go. Hang on. Let me cut it, give it a little haircut. Okay. The 12-weight is much easier to get through the eye. I will say that, but I always like to challenge myself when I'm in front of a live audience. This is annoying. Yeah. It kind of builds the excitement though, doesn't it? Everybody's being so quiet. I think I got it. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to pull that to the back. Now I do have a tip clip on this. This is just a little sample fabric that I have. So again, I do like to follow my own advice. If you're wondering what this is, I did a tip clip on this as well. Let me lower the exposure and see if that helps us strobing. When I tested this, I think that's better. Okay. When I got this machine, I've always had this little seam guide and I never used it till a few weeks ago. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. I just love this thing. I have my stitch width on 9. This machine, I think, is the only one on the market that has a 9mm stitch width. And for the raindrop stitch, that looks like a raindrop on the edge of the fabric. I'm gonna stitch, and I like to use stay tapes. As I mentioned before, there are certain things that need a little bit more support on the edge. And I tried this on the first Wrap Me Up that's on the cover, and I can show it to you on the cover shot of the Wrap Me Up poncho. And I hate to call it a poncho because I think it looks nicer than that, but it was a sweater knit fabric. And that's and I also had my stitch length on 4.5, my differential feet on 1. But when I did not use the stay tapes, the stitch didn't look as nice. So this is the knit stay tape that's white. You could use black too. And I have those. And you also will get 10% off on those with the code TAPES, TAPES. When you check out, you'll see that. So let's try this. This is just my sample, and let's see what it looks like. Stitch length 4.5, stitch width is 9. Needle tension is 1, lower looper is 9. So let's see what this looks like. That's the Bernina Burke, they call that on the these machines, the computerized machines. Off, and let's take a look. It doesn't look like much on the back, but let's look at it from the front. Ooh, it is pretty. Oh, I love the hot pink against the green. Hang on a second. I'm cutting off these little thread chains. Look at this. Doesn't that look like raindrops?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So let's do that. That was my sample one. So that will work. I'll show it to you again, because this is 3 stitches in 1. I'm going to move this to cut just a hair more off the edge. Not a lot, but a little bit. I'm going to do it with the wrong side face up. And I have a knee lift that I can lift my presser foot with. Get my fabric under there, right up against this little seam guide. Stitch, and always hold on to your threads in the back when you're using a thicker decorative thread. And while I'm thinking of it, somebody had said to me, oh, that machine is so loud. Well, I have an enhanced microphone 2 inches in front of it in my camera. And also when you change the tension to be such a contrast, 1 on the needle and 9 on the looper, it makes it a little louder with the decorative thread. Look at that. How beautiful is that? Yeah. Isn't that pretty? And so when I did the Wrap Me Up, I wanted a pretty stitch on the edge of the sweater knit. But I didn't want it to roll under or double it up because I wanted to keep it a single layer so it would stay fluid and pretty. And this is what I worked on and came up with. That's an 8 weight. It's very pretty also with a 12 weight thread. But guess what? You can do the same stitch, exact same setup, except that I'm going to shorten the stitch length. No, I'm going to leave the stitch length where it is. Here, another stitch that you can do. And I'm going to put my wash away stabilizer. You've probably all used this. It's just Sulky Salvia, but you want one that you can see through. That's the important thing. And I like to bring that under the needle and nail it down with the needle, because if I try to do it with just the, to move it along with the fabric in front of the presser foot tends to keep pushing it back. So I like to move it along and cut the length longer than the edge I'm working on. So let's see what happens with the fabric right side up. Now on this side, I decided to use a woven stay tape. Depending on what you're doing, whether you want to have some stretch or you want to keep the edge flat and smooth and really stable, you could go to a woven, and I have that in my store as well. But what I'm doing here is I'm stitching with the fabric right side up and the stabilizer. So let's see what happens. And I do like to stitch a little more slowly with the decorative threads. So let's see what happens with this one. Here's my stabilizer. You see my lower looper thread, just the serger comb thread on the top. Here's my decorative thread. There's that raindrop look. But let's see what happens when we pull the stabilizer. It comes over and creates a blanket stitch. So it's really, really pretty like that. Now, there's one other thing that you can do with this same exact stitch. I think I'm going to sneeze. Hang on. Excuse me. As I said, it's the height of allergy season. So with this, using those same settings, I'm just going to shorten the stitch length a little bit. Let me show you how I do that. I'll switch to my other camera. And I know we're a little bit over time, but I think that'll be okay. I think you'll forgive me. Okay, so let me get this. Let me get it so it's focused. Okay, so here is my stitch length adjustment. I'm going to tap that. And I'm going to bring my stitch length. I can use a little slider and bring it down to about 2.5. I could also use the plus and minus to get that. So I've shortened up my stitch a little bit. I think, well, I'll just leave it since we're just doing this as a sample. I think I would probably want to change my differential feed, but this is just a sample. So we'll see how this goes like this. I'm going to move that seam guide out. Now on this one, I'm going to just trim off a little bit. I haven't changed any of the settings. Oh, let me go back to my other camera. Okay, so I haven't changed any of the other settings or moved the thread around at all, but this is the exact same setup. It's scooting around here. Scissors. And now here it's like 3 stitches in one. Oops, what did I do? I think, did I forget to move something? Maybe. But when I open this up, I have the reverse flat lock ladders. I think I should have lengthened the stitch out just a little bit longer, but that's what I'm talking about, why you want to make a sample so that you don't have any little boo-boos. I think I should have left that longer. I was used to the 12 weight threads for that. I think I should have put it on maybe 3 or 3.5 to lengthen those threads out. But there it is on that. And I could probably even get a better result with a woven fabric. Let me just see if I have a woven.
Can you show the back, what the back side of that looks like after you've opened the stitch?
Yep, I'm going to do it on a woven fabric. Let me just, let me lengthen my stitch because of the thickness of this thread. And I'll show you, I'm going to do it on a woven fabric. I think I'll get a better result. Let me hold on to my stitch, my thread chain. And I'm going to even switch over to the other camera because I think you can get a better view of it front and back. So hang on just a second. I'm going to cut my threads. Now let me switch over to the other camera so you can see. I'm going to go to my table camera. You can still see the woolly nylon there. Let me get that out of the line of fire. Okay, So here is my needle thread. There's that raindrop looking stitch, although I've shortened it up so you can see it's closer together from the 4.5. There is my lower looper thread. Now let's open this up. There's my reverse flat lock, my ladders. Just like that. So there's my front, there's the right side of the fabric. Here's what it looks like on the wrong side. There is my lower looper fabric, but you can see how the fabric lies flat and smooth underneath. Is that what you wanted to see?
Yes, I just wondered what happened to the seam on the backside. I've seen several different people demonstrate this type of technique, but they never show the back. So I wasn't sure if the raw edges of the fabric like completely overlapped, or if they just kind of folded over on themselves, or
Well,
what that looked like.
actually, when you look underneath here, and it's kind, I don't know how visible it is on camera, but there is a little bit of a fold underneath here. But I could take something really skinny, like a thin knitting needle or something like that, and flatten that out. But honestly, if it's that hard to see, is it worth taking the time to do? I don't think so. But you know, you do have that nice flat lock. But going back to what you said about not knowing whether the seam is encased, oftentimes when you look at athletic wear, especially things for runners and things like that, they use an industrial flat lock, which is a whole different animal than this. An industrial flat lock has 6 threads in it. But the reason they choose a flat lock stitch is because the seam allowance isn't free of the fabric itself. It's locked against it. And so the reason that they like to use that is because it's flat locked and locked inside the stitch and against the public side of the fabric. It prevents chafing. So that's why you see that on a lot of athletic and runners pants and all sorts of outfits. Anything that's going to cause chafing, if the seam allowance was allowed to kind of flap free the way it typically does with a serge seam, then it could chafe the skin. But because it's locked, it doesn't move, so it won't chafe. Does that answer your question for you?
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, sure. Okay. All right. I think we're kind of past our deadline, but that's okay. I love doing these classes. Let me go back to me. Oh, that fabric shows up much lighter. I think I had my exposure on that a little bit lighter, but that's okay. I'd rather have you be able to see better. So, 2 people in the waiting room. Let me let them in. Okay. So, does anyone have any other questions at all? Okay, I see a hand up. Yep. Go ahead, Linda.
Okay. Does the woolly nylon melt?
Yes. In a word, yes. The operative word in woolly nylon is nylon. So when you use that, it makes a very nice rolled hem and it's very soft. You can get that effect with either woolly nylon, but also there is woolly polyester maxi stretch, which is by Maxi Lock. Maxi stretch is a woolly polyester, and Soft Lock by Wonderfil is also a woolly polyester. And the reason there's nothing wrong with woolly nylon, but the melting point is much lower when you press it. And I've done it more than once where I've used it for napkins because it's soft. It has excellent coverage on the edges of fabric. And it's nice for things like napkins or anything that you're going to have against your face so that you're not scratching yourself. I don't like to use metallic threads for it's pretty on a rolled hem napkin, but it sometimes can be scratchy if you're patting your mouth or whatever. But woolly nylon does melt at a low point on the iron. So if you're going to press something with a woolly nylon edge, make sure you lower the temperature of your iron, number one, and use a press cloth. Woolly polyester has a higher melting point, but it's also a synthetic. So you can't use as hot an iron as you would on cottons and linens and things like that. So, but you can definitely crank it up from what you would use on a woolly nylon. But yes, it will. The short answer is yes, it will melt. So any other questions at all about anything else? This is such a fun class. But yes, my wrap me up pattern, let me just see if I have one down here. Hang on a second. That makes a great beach cover up. It's, yeah, let me just show you some of these. And that one, I did the raindrop stitch on, and actually I can pop through my slideshow once again. Here's that pattern. So there's the one in back of me. Here's the notch neckline. Here is the cowl neckline. And the raindrop stitch on the edge of this. Let me just go back super quick. I know I'm taking up more of your time, but whoops, that's not what I want. Hang on. Let me see if I can go back to my screen share. This. Okay, there's the raindrop stitch on that cover shot. You can see that. And there is the black knit stay tape that I have in my store. I did use that because it did keep the edge looking good. It does not look quite as good without a stay tape under it. But you can see that was an excellent choice for a sweater knit to keep that looking really smooth and nice. There it is on the green sweater knit as well. There it is with the blanket stitch. That's what I just demoed. So just to give you an idea of how that works. But yeah, this one is available. You can either download it or you can purchase the hard copy too. And again, there's 10% off on the artist palette packs, Bayside Blooms, soft pastels, bright and bold. These are the pink box variety. And the stay tapes also are 10% off using the code TAPES. The discount code for the threads is DECO, DECO, EXPO, EXPO. So, but I thank you all, and I thank you for staying overtime with me too. So this was really fun. Are there any questions before we close out? Are we all good? Oh, somebody's got a cute puppy. Linda?
I do have a question about the top stitch needles. Does your serger and your sewing machine use two different needle systems? Is there such a thing as a top stitch needle for a serger? Because my serger uses the ELX 705.
Yeah, and what serger are you using, Sarah?
I'm Diana, and
Diana,
I have a Baby Lock Triumph.
Oh yeah, you can use, no, the top stitch needle is just a top stitch needle. There is not a specific one for your sewing machine and the specific one for the serger. They're the same thing.
Oh, okay, because it seems like my serger needles are just a little bit longer than the sewing machine needle system.
No, but and I do have a tip clip on different needles. Stretch needles you can use in both your sewing machine and serger. There is not one specific to a serger, and the same goes for metallic and top stitch needles too.
That is really good information. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Anybody else with any questions? This is great. A lot of good questions, a lot of good interaction here. So thank you very much. And if anyone has suggestions or requests for other future classes, please let me know. And we will, I will take a look at those, but thank you all so much. And again, if you don't get the link tonight, you will get it tomorrow to rewatch, especially for those who weren't able to join us live. They're not hearing this now if they're not listening to it live. But I thank you all very, very much. And I hope I see you again in person at an event. But if not, I'll see you again on Zoom. So enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Take
much.
care.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Gail.
Thank you.